On the 20th of October 2011, Muammar Gaddafi was murdered, and it got a lot of people talking. The whole of African continent was shaken because Gaddafi had a lot of impact on Africans. Currently, we've gotten videos of a man trying to confess what really happened to Gaddafi, because after the demise of President Gaddafi, we got rumors, we got information circulating on the internet that he was murdered because he was a dictator, he was murdered because he was an authoritarian, and a whole lot of information coming out about Gaddafi. But today, there is more to it that we do not know. Let's go watch this video. We'll give you more updates afterwards.
It's like Libya. We
currently happening, and the whole issue of how the murder of Gaddafi happened, and that is what this man was trying to let us know. Nana, can you brief us more on what this man was actually saying, what happened? And I get people trying to blame Barack Obama for the murder of Gaddafi.
Of course, Barack Obama. Gaddafi's death happened under the tenure of Barack Obama. So, I mean, it makes a lot of sense when people really want to point fingers at Barack Obama because they believe that he oversaw this. I remember during that time too, I think the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, she was also a pivotal figure in terms of eliminating Gaddafi. Now, years after his death, I think over 12 or so years, now we are getting a vivid glance or a vivid in-look or outlook as to what really was happening beneath the ground, and the reason why the Americans were so much afraid of Libya. Remember, way back in I think 2012 or 13, we had people traveling from West Africa to Libya. And they felt, I mean, I had friends who traveled to Libya and they felt like they were okay. They told me they were okay. They were basically living a good life there. And people really mirrored Libya's life to that of Europe. So if you get to Libya, it's more like you've got to a part of Europe. And Gaddafi had a broader perspective, had a broader plan as to what he wanted Africa to be. Remember, this man is an OD, and he believed or had in mind the same principles that Kwame Nkrumah here in Ghana harbored, the man who helped us gain independence. So the whole idea of Gaddafi all along was to make sure that the whole African countries will become united. Then we have a united Africa, just like what we have in EU or in Europe, what we term European Union. We can have the same thing in Africa, African Union. So that at the end of the day, in terms of the whole world economy, we can be also a uniting force and perhaps stand up to the global world superpowers like the United States of America and also China and perhaps to Europe. So this was the whole mindset of Gaddafi. But ultimately, Americans and also during that time, like Clinton and Barack Obama, they felt like Gaddafi was a threat to their national security, and they believe that during that time Gaddafi had overstayed, and he was treating his reign as a president or as a leader in Libya as more like a monarchy. He will be on forever. And you remember during that time, I think this was way back like 12 or 13 years ago. During that time, the notion on the ground and the news that came, I remember watching it clearly on CNN, was that Gaddafi wanted to hand over power to his son. And remember, during that same time too, that was the time that we had the Arab uprising. Remember, when someone deliberately bent himself to protest high prices of goods and services in, I think, Tunisia or so. Then from Tunisia, it went to Egypt, from Egypt. So many of these leaders who had stayed in power for so many years, these uprisings saw them removed. And now we are getting a first outlook that this whole uprising, the whole engineer, the whole architect, the whole framework, the whole push was engineered by the West, because they felt like if the West, if Africa, or even the northern parts of Africa if the northern parts of Africa had united, it was definitely going to be a threat for America. And today, Tucker Carlson hosted one person who perhaps had worked with the CIA, that's the Central Intelligence Agency, to brief us more and expose how Gaddafi's death was plotted, and all because the Americans and also the West viewed him as a threat to their national security and as a threat to the global dominance of Europe and also America.
So if I understand you clearly, Gaddafi was murdered because Americans saw him as a threat.
That is what the man is saying. It's not my words. I mean, that has been the motive for years now. And now the man is just basically confirming it that, hey, Gaddafi's death, there was more sinister things that we knew that was on the surface. So now he's telling us, this is a person who's been with the CIA, and he's telling us that Gaddafi's death was not just a mere coincidence. He's telling that Gaddafi's death was more like plotted by CIA and also the US. Okay. And he's saying it. If the US believes that what he's saying is not true, perhaps they can take him on. But this clearly tells you how, I mean, Africa, we still need to go back and realize that before we even do anything, or before we can even rise up and even match up to these people, the basic thing that we have to do is to first of all unite, and that is only when perhaps we can have something close to what America is enjoying, and the global dominance and power of not just America but also world superpowers like Asia and also Europe. Yeah.
So, per what the man was saying, is there any way that a sanction can be released on those that took part in the murder of Gaddafi?
Unfortunately, no sanctions. I mean, take a critical look at what is happening between Israel and Hamas. Okay, Israel have been bombing, and just because the United States of America, I don't go that path, but then we realize that the US have the opportunity to say, hey, let's negotiate. But then they've kind of given a green light to the Israel to carry on this attack in the name of clearing Hamas. And at the end of the day, who has been able to sanction Israel? It is virtually impossible for you to sanction Israel because they are being backed by the world superpower. So even if this is true, or even if you have empirical evidence to suggest that all of these allegations, which is being labeled or outlined by this particular acclaimed former CIA, is true, the best thing we can do is to talk about it. There's nothing like, how are you going to sanction a country that you basically export things to increase or perhaps make your economy stronger? Are you going to say, I'm not going to sell cocoa to the United States of America again? If you don't do that as a country, if you are not selling cocoa and go to the United States of America, what happens is that we have all of these minerals and these agricultural goods. They get to rot and we lose revenue. Okay. And at the end of the day too, we need this income to grow. So from all sides of the corners, Trump will tell you that you don't have the cards. You don't have the cards. Perhaps if one day Africa should rise to the task, and any country in Africa should become a global superpower, we can start. Then we can start negotiating. But for now, we just have to sit down and just watch. Yeah.
So that is all about President Gaddafi murder and the correlation it has with the US and the CIA. More updates to follow on these issues and more.
It's like Libya. We were the